Hi and welcome to Tree Savers. My name is Jamie Longo and I'm going to talk you through some basic questions about Hemlock woolly Adelgid and the ST beetle. I'm going to start with pointing out my presentation here. It's very short. It's just to give me some guidelines so I don't forget what the most important things are to tell you today. As for what is HWA, the Hemlock woolly Adelgid is a piercing insect, a true bug, and it kills trees because it pierces into the new growth of the trees where the nutrients are most prevalent, and the tree needs that to continue to grow. But because the insect also needs that as its sustenance, this is what it becomes on our hemlock trees. This is a branch that we took from the field of an infested hemlock twig, and this is how you would find it on the tree. And then when you flip it over, all of this white stuff, these are the woolly egg sacs of the Hemlock woolly Adelgid. And this, you can see at the very tip where I left it, is what happens to our trees when the piercing insect gets a hold of the nutrients that the tree needs to grow. I'll give you just a quick look underneath the magnifier to see just what these puffs look like. And unfortunately, you can't zero in to see how close we need you to be able to tell that there are actually probably between 20 and 50 eggs per sac. And if you're in the North Carolina area where a lot of our customers are down south, these sacs get a lot bigger and a lot more eggs. So I'll set that aside for right now. So far as the hemlock trees, it kills them because without the nutrients, the needles turn gray, brown, dry, and brittle, and they just fall off. And especially out in the field, you can see as you're driving down the highway that hemlock after hemlock, you'd see one that's just sort of declining, another one that's really declining, and then another one that's nothing but spiderweb existence left. So that's what we're going after here. And I'm going to refer back to this. Why are Eastern and Carolina hemlocks important? First one is obviously scenic beauty. These are some of the most beautiful trees in our area, all along the eastern coast. They're all along our waterways and our national parks, and they're just beautiful trees. They've got a draping canopy. They're bright green. They fill the space where all of the other trees die back, and they're actually a shade tree as well, so they can exist and grow when there's little sunlight. So they're a very important part of our forests. Erosion control. Flooding has been a major issue for a lot of areas the last couple years, and erosion control is huge because hemlocks have a fibrous root system. You can sort of see if you look at this picture here, I'll let Amanda zoom in, those roots spread out and they tie the stream beds in place. Very little soil can get through, so you don't have the sediment pollution on the bottom of your streams. And with that in place, then you also don't have the stream beds collapsing and therefore flooding over. Hydrology modification. That is basically the fact that there's cooling temperatures and the drapery over the water actually provides a mist. And within that mist, you have the wild trout habitat. Our native brook trout depend 100% on hemlock forests for those cool, deep pools. And the hemlocks also have an internal ecosystem. There's a rare species habitat, and I'm just going to pan down here so that you can see some of the species that would be affected by the loss of hemlock trees. The native brook trout is one, but there are also many nesting birds, and there's the long-eared owl and the flying squirrel. So there's a lot of, like, you know, cute animals and things that we actually need in our forest that we would totally lose if the hemlocks were to die out. So let's skip. Next, why are pesticides not enough to save our hemlock trees? Well, pesticides treat a problem and it can kill the insect. The pesticides work by usually injection. There are some spray methods as well that use either the trunk of the tree or spray directly onto the leaves or needles. The problem with pesticides is that it needs to be done again and again. If the tree is already sick, for example, the tree already has dead or dying limbs. So if those limbs are not taking up water properly, they're certainly not going to take up a chemical properly and distribute it to all of those affected limbs. So when you go out in the field and you pump chemicals into the ground or into the trunk, you're hitting hollow spots, you're hitting dead limbs, and you're not really killing the massive quantity of the Hemlock woolly adelgid. You're killing a lot, and your tree will probably survive for another couple years, but then it's going to need to be treated again. And while it needs to be treated again, those dead or dying limbs that did not take the pesticide are going to continue to transmit the Hemlock woolly adelgid to your other hemlock trees. So the best method that we can possibly come up with is biocontrol, and I'll explain why that's important. The Hemlock woolly adelgid life cycle, and I'll just point out we have a winged adult. That one is actually not an issue for us because our trees do not support the winged adult. So that's about 50% of the Hemlock woolly adelgid, once it hits the adult stage, actually flies off and just dies. But number 2 is the Hemlock woolly adelgid, the actual adult that lives on our hemlock trees. And this is all of its eggs around it. And each one of those eggs breaks into these little crawlers. And those little crawlers eventually create nymphs, which the 5 is over here. These are the dormant nymphs. That's what you expect to see over the summer. So throughout the warm months, especially in the summer, you really can't see the Hemlock woolly adelgid on your trees because the white woolly sacs have yet to be formed, which comes in the active nymph and then the wool. So just because you don't see wool on the trees, if you see your hemlocks declining, then it's a good suspicion that you have Hemlock woolly adelgid. So you would need an expert to come out and look, or you would have to wait until it gets to be the cooler times. In Pennsylvania, that's around November, where you would start seeing wool. This is the ST beetle life cycle, and this is why biocontrol is so important. Biocontrol relies on nature to do its job. In Japan, we have Hemlock woolly adelgid, and we have hemlock trees, and we have ST beetles. And the reason all 3 are able to coexist without the death of the trees is because there's a balance. And the problem with Hemlock woolly adelgid on our eastern coast is the fact that there is no balance. We don't have any native predators to the Hemlock woolly adelgid here. So we need to rely on introducing one so that we don't have to go out there and keep injecting every tree that's affected. The Hemlock woolly adelgid is spreading faster than we can stop it, and we need a natural mechanism to combat this. We're never going to save our trees by going out there and pumping chemicals into every tree that we come across that's infected. It's impossible. But the ST beetle is actually specialized in seeking out and eating Hemlock woolly adelgid. So better than we could ever tell if a tree was infested or not, the Hemlock woolly adelgid will be sought out by the ST beetle. And the most important thing about the ST beetle is their life cycle. They 100% match up with the Hemlock woolly adelgid. The Hemlock woolly adelgid lays eggs, it triggers a hormonal instinct from the ST beetle, and they lay their own eggs when they eat the woolly adelgid eggs. So therefore the ST beetle will never outcompete its food source. It will continue to eat the woolly adelgid so long as the woolly adelgid is reproducing, and it will stop reproducing when the woolly adelgid stops. So it's a continual existence, and as the woolly adelgid moves, the ST beetle will move with it. What's so special about Tree Savers? I want to introduce you to a specialized lab that we are creating. We want to go 100% after this pest. The Hemlock woolly adelgid is spreading, and we want our beetles to spread with it. The biggest problem with biocontrol in the past has just been continued supply and availability to private landowners. So now we have actually created a very large specialized lab to do nothing but, right now, create ST beetles. So I'm going to show you our lab really quick and explain to you why we're going to work this year. These are our ovipositioning jars. They all have 15 beetles. We have 10 female and 5 male for each jar. We expect to get between 600 and 700 eggs a week out of these jars, and as you can see, we've got a lot of jars. We can run as many as we want. We have a whole entire shelf, and at that rate we could easily put out 100,000, 200,000 beetles, all supply and demand. These are our rearing cages. Each cage can be expected to yield between 500 and 1,000 eggs. Eggs to adult, actually. It takes a 5-week process to get adults out of these cages from eggs. and each one of them will be shipped as is after we account for the adults. So you will actually, if you order an order of 500 from us, you will be getting more than that. You'll be getting eggs, larvae, pupa, and adults. And that's how we establish colonies on the hemlocks that are affected with this woolly adelgid. I want to thank you for joining us at Tree Savers today, and I want to invite you to visit our website. We have www.tree-savers.com, and visit us there and see why we're so dedicated, and by all means call us. We will be happy to guide you through the process of your release and answer any more questions you may have.